And greetings. I'm back again to discuss some themes in my recent work, The Threshold. Um, if you watched the previous videos, I've changed location. I'm now actually in my basement, trying out the acoustics here. Hopefully, it's not so echoey as the empty room upstairs. Well, rather than read from the book as I did previously, I'd like to discuss some themes in the book. And I'm not going to go in a linear fashion from the beginning to the end, but I'm going to jump around at certain chapters or aspects or elements. And for now and for this talk at the moment, I'd like to discuss a chapter which is talking about the terraforming of planet Earth. I think it's chapter 6. Yes, it's chapter 6 is called World Building and Techno-Terraforming. And it also coincides with the recent essay just released on Substack, which is taken from that chapter on terraforming. The term terraforming I've discussed before. It's a kind of a term which is used for the transformation of a planet. It's generally used in a kind of a space colonization form. Anyone familiar with Star Trek film 2, The Wrath of Khan, will understand about terraforming. So it's when you take a place, such as a planet, and you adapt its environment to make it congenial or suitable for the dominant life species that wishes to inhabit the planet. So it's about adapting an environment for the dominant species. And what I say in that chapter and what I say in the book is that human civilization on this planet is approaching what is actually in an era of techne. It's an era of techne. And the word techne, Techne, with an emphasis on the E, techne, was originally a Greek word which became known as referring to the mechanical arts, or really those mechanical aspects which substitute nature. So it's mechanical reproduction or substitution of nature, techne. And the mechanical arts actually have a long history. And anyone with any kind of background in religious history will know that the mechanical arts are featured very strongly in the medieval and Middle Ages in the church and in the structure of the church, because at that time a lot of invention and experimentation of mechanical arts came into the monastery or monastic structure. Two theologians that come to mind, especially because they're very similar of the era, in the 13th century. In the 13th century, you have the Franciscan monk Roger Bacon, who was known as Dr. Mirabilis. And he was into developing mechanical arts, into optics, and there's the legend that he created this brazen head, sometimes referred to as an automated head that could be asked questions and it would speak. So a kind of the first forerunner in the 13th century of the automated mechanical human. That's a legacy. And the other side of the pond in the 13th century was the Mallorcan theologian Ramon Lull, who created a kind of calculus, and often by some computer scientists, he's regarded as the pioneer of computer theory because he came up with a kind of calculus binary system. And so did Francis Bacon. Later on, Francis Bacon came up with a calculus which is seen as the forerunner of binary. So these mechanical arts have a long history, and beforehand a long history of a kind of amalgamation with spiritual religious pursuits. And I think there's a apocryphal tale of Roger Bacon going to the Pope at the time and insisting that the Pope would allow and invest and promote monastic research into the mechanical arts so that they would have mechanical defense against Satan or the Antichrist when it appeared. Um, but so there's a long history of using, I say, mechanical arts into the human condition. And techne actually is not just about the substitution of nature, but it's the environment that it creates, and these the skill sets and the behavioral practices that get changed through that environment. Um, simple examples would be today of people becoming so dependent on spell check when they're writing in the word processor, which I can adhere to as a very useful tool. When you get used to spell check, your spelling, you become sloppy or lazy on your spelling because you know it's going to be corrected. Or in the era of smartphones and mobile phones, we no longer have the need to memorize phone numbers as we did when those of you like me can remember landlines. You had to remember your phone numbers, all your friends. Um, Now, you see, with smartphones, it just keeps in memory all the numbers. So the human memory gets replaced. So that change of human behavior um, is referred to as techne, how it's changing our cognitive skill sets. So what I'm saying is that we're moving into an era of advanced techne, which is influencing the human cognitive skill set. And that can be in the workplace, in the home place, in our general lifestyles. Um, we have behavioral change because of that. But more importantly, is that the environment in which we move through, the human environment, which until now has been wholly organic, well, wholly organic up to the first, second industrial revolutions, but after the third industrial revolution in the middle of the 20th century, and now it's wholly been adapted to a technological environment. Now, in the first and second industrial revolutions, there was hardware. We had trains to help mobility. We had cars and trams. We had the telegraph and then radar and stuff for communications. But now you see we have the whole kind of non-visible sphere is impregnated with a technosphere. We have satellites all around us beaming information continuously. We have Wi-Fi, we have the electromagnetic environment or the electrosmog, we have 4G, 5G masters and antennas. We have basically the Internet of Things communicating all the time. So our environment is non-visibly saturated with technology. And so I'm saying that that's become like a terraforming of the planet. And I make an analogy. In 1987, there was a British poet called Heathcote Williams who wrote a book-length poem called Autogeddon about the overwhelming influence of the motor car. And any music fans amongst us will recognize that also Julian Cope, the British singer-songwriter, also released an album called Autogeddon in the 90s. But so I'll read an extract that I quote in the book from the poem Autogeddon. And what Heathcote Williams says is that if an alien was passing by the planet, and I think I've talked about it before, so forgive me if I'm repeating it, if they looked down, this alien would think that the dominant life form would be the auto car, the motor car. So here's the extract. If an alien was to hover a few hundred yards above the planet, it could be forgiven for thinking that cars were the dominant life form, and that human beings were a kind of ambulatory fuel cell, injected when the car wished to move off and ejected when they were spent. So the human's like a battery. It enters the car, and all of a sudden the car moves. And then when the human gets out, the car stops. When the battery leaves, the car stops. The battery's dead, finished. That's quite a powerful image in that because of all the huge advance in road building and infrastructure and all the connectivity of transport, it seemed like transport, specifically the motor car, was the dominant species of the planet. And the humans were just like batteries who would help the dominant species to move around. What I'm saying is that we've now come a step further in that kind of trajectory, and that it's not the motor car per se, which is a dominant life form, but it's technology as a whole. And not only hardware technology, such as automatons or transport or computers, but actually it's the non-visible technologies, the algorithms that underwrite a lot of our infrastructure, the coding, the binary language of coding, which makes most things run on this planet. That makes it very convenient for humans. We can travel by plane very easily. We have GPS satellite. We have technology like I'm using now. All this is very useful, but it underwrites the code. So using the Heathcote Williams analogy, that if an alien would be passing by the planet and happen to hover over and take a look, they could be forgiven for thinking that actually the dominant form of life on this planet would be inorganic. That is a technological form of life, a silicon life, not a carbon-based life. Because the environment on the ground, the visible environment, the code in which makes the infrastructure operate, and the non-visible realms, such as electromagnetism and all the information being sent through the air, um, actually is inorganic. And so we have we have come to a point where the environment that the humans are moving through as an organic species is predominantly inorganic. And so you'll be forgiven for thinking that, therefore, the majority of the inorganic environment supports an inorganic life form as a dominant species, and organic life is secondary or further. So what that pertains to is, of course, that we are going to have an impact upon our modalities of perception, which has already shifted drastically in the last few decades. Our notion of time and space has been drastically altered, is that we can communicate with people simultaneously um, across the globe at other ends. I could be speaking to someone in Australia or the Arctic, and given a communication system, we would have more or less instantaneous communication. So that space of thousands of kilometers, that timing of someone being maybe 10 hours time difference, but still being in the same moment, that affects our cognition. And I think the younger generations coming through with this digital environment have a completely different time space modality. So that's not a bad thing, of course, because it helps us to, I think, conceive of the cosmos in a more appropriate way. Because without actually um, advancing and developing our time-based perceptions, we would remain in a limited understanding of the cosmos. But of course, the issue is that the environment can run away with itself, i.e., the algorithms and the software and the coding, to a point where humanity has no understanding of how its environment is being coded, which then reinforces the importance of our natural environment, the organic environment. And that if we spend more time in an inorganic environment, we're becoming taken out of our natural situ, taken out of our natural vibrational frequency environment. And that's why I think we'd be having a dissonance in the human condition, because more and more people are spending most of their lives in a digitalized environment whether at work, in the office, through screen time, through all the time on their mobile phones, every time, everywhere they walk, all day. And there's less time in an organic environment, and that's going to be detrimental, I think, to retuning and recalibrating the human faculties and our organs of perception. So I warn against that in the book. I'm not against technology. I never have been against technology. I'm against the uses of it or the misuses of it, which takes the human being away from their natural environment, from their organic milieu, and also disconnects us from our vital energetic contact with source or something greater or the sacred, which vitalizes the human condition. The more we cut off, the more we lose energy. We become like a battery draining down that cannot plug itself back in. So I think it's important to recognize what the terraforming or the techno environment is the consequences of that. So that's what I talk about in that chapter. And I thought I'd bring it up now at this point. So I hope that kind of explains it. If there's any questions, please pop them below. I don't feel that what I'm saying is unique or unknown in any way. I've never claimed to be putting forward unique perspectives. I'm just trying to put them, transmit them in a way that some people who approach them can find them understandable and maybe trigger some thinking and some consideration. I'm just passing on certain ideas that I have, and I'm sure that most people would recognize that and probably have the same thoughts yourself, which is good. So we're on the same page. Of course, there are people who disagree with me and disagree with other people all the time, which is fine, because the human being has a capacity for tolerance of different ideas, or it should do, of course. So, well, I send you my greetings, and be well, stay healthy, stay safe, and above all, stay grounded. Okay, cheers now. Bye bye.